Hello friends, it's Kristie Marcotte. In today's video, I'll be making some cards using Paper Rose Studio's Be Happy collection. I'll be using the 6x6 size, but they also have the 12x12 size available. There are 18 double-sided pattern papers, 3 each of 12 designs. Some of the papers do have cut-apart images and sentiments, although I decided not to use them this time. I love all the bright and sunshiny colors in this collection. There are lots of gnome images, sunflowers, and bees. Perfect collection for brightening up a gloomy winter day. Along with the 6x6 paper pad, I'll also be using the coordinating die cuts. I love that Paper Rose has been offering the die cut packs. They're filled with lots of fun images and a couple of sentiments. There are 4 A5 sheets and all of the images simply pop out. Sometimes it'll leave that little tiny paper tab. I simply use my scissors to trim that off. This first sheet has lots of sunflowers. There's some daisies, several images of bees. The next sheet features several gnomes and even a tier tray. Then we have more sunflowers, and finally more gnomes and some honeycombs. Since I love making multiples of the same card, I did pick up a second die cut pack. So let's go ahead and get started with card design number 1. I will be using some card sketches for inspiration. The first sketch is from Sketch Saturday. This is number 694. And if you are interested in any of the card sketches I use in this video, I share all of that information on my coordinating blog post. That link is provided in the description box below, or you can simply head over to KristieMarcotte.com. I selected 2 pattern papers for the background. I have some sunflower paper for that wider piece and some yellow and gray stripe paper for the bottom. I'll be layering everything on some black cardstock. In the very center, I did add a narrow strip of black cardstock just for some separation between the 2 pattern papers. Next, I'll add a stitch circle die cut, and I did cut this out from some white shimmer cardstock. I'll adhere that in place using liquid adhesive. For the 2 banners on the right side, I'm using some green and also some yellow cardstock. I'll cut a fishtail on the bottom. Before adhering the green banner in place, I will add some scrap cardstock pieces above and below where it goes over that narrow black strip. Just adhere those in place with some liquid adhesive. And that way there won't be a noticeable bump from that black strip going behind the green banner. Next, I'll add the narrow yellow banner. This card will be featuring one of the adorable gnomes. I did put some foam dimension on the back side. I'll remove the release paper and adhere my little bee gnome onto the circle die cut. For a sentiment, I'll be using one of Paper Rose's sentiment sheets. This is from their All Occasions collection. Throughout the video, I'll be using that collection and also their black and white sentiment sheets. No stamping at all this time. I chose the sentiment Hello. I did cut the right side at an angle. Before adhering it to the card, I did put a scrap cardstock piece underneath the very right side. Then I'll adhere it in place using liquid adhesive. For embellishments, I'm using the clear crystal mix from Paper Rose. I'll add 2 of them in the upper right-hand corner, 1 above the sentiment and 2 in the lower left-hand corner. There are 4 different sizes of the crystals. I'm just digging around the container to get the size that I want. And I do want to mention the crystals do not come in the little plastic container I'm using. I just like to put my embellishments in those little containers for ease of use. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this design. Now moving on to card design number 2. The card sketch is from Sugar Pea Designs. This is Sugar Sketch number 9. I selected 2 pattern papers. I have some daisy paper for that narrow, longer strip, and a very light yellow honeycomb design for the other piece. For the background of the card, I have some craft cardstock, and I added a fun detail using Paper Rose's hand stitching cover plate. Now this cover plate does cut out all those tiny little holes, but instead of using the die to actually die cut, I used it to emboss the background. So now all those tiny little holes have an indentation, but they didn't cut through. I'll layer the background piece on some blue cardstock, put some ATG tape on the back, and add my card front onto a card base, leaving 1/8 of an inch of the white card base showing. All of my cards in this video are American Standard A2 size, 4 1/4 inches by 5 1/2 inches. Next I'll add the daisy paper, then the honeycomb paper. Before adhering that yellow honeycomb, I did put some scrap cardstock underneath, just on the right side. For the narrow banner that goes across the card, I selected some yellow cardstock that almost matches that light yellow honeycomb pattern paper. Cut a fishtail on the left side. Before adhering it in place, I'll put some foam dimension on the very right side and also the left side. I'll put a small piece of scrap cardstock on the left side where it sits on top of that daisy pattern paper. Then I'll adhere it in place using liquid adhesive. Adding all those different layers helps keep everything nice and level. Next I'll add a stitched oval die cut. I'll adhere that in place using liquid adhesive. This card will feature the adorable tier tray die cut image. It's so fun that all the little pieces on the tier tray are the same images as the die cut pack. I'll adhere that in place using some liquid adhesive. For a sentiment, I'm using another hello, and I'll adhere that underneath the yellow honeycomb paper in the lower right hand corner. Then to finish off the card, I'll add some more of the clear crystals. I'll add 2 in the upper left hand corner and 3 around the die cut image. I'm using an embellishment wand to pick those up, adding just a small drop of liquid adhesive, then pressing them in place. My favorite sizes of the crystals are the 2 medium sizes. I think I've used up almost all of the second largest size. I keep searching through my container, but I think they're just about gone. So there is my finished card, and again I did make 2 using this design. It's fun that the collection has some nice soft colors mixed in with the bright vibrant yellows. For card design number 3, this is a very simple card design. The card sketch is from Freshly Made Sketches. It's number 558. For the background, I'm using that same light yellow pattern paper with the honeycomb design. I'll layer it on some black cardstock, and that'll really give it some nice contrast. Put my card front onto a card base, leaving 1/8 of an inch of the white card base showing. For the 3 small squares, I selected the lovely sunflower paper that I featured on the first card, but this time I used a stitch square die from Paper Rose and cut out 3 of the images. 2 of the images are the same, and I'll have those kitty corner from each other. The one design that's different will go in the upper left hand corner. And I am layering all of those pieces on some black cardstock. One thing I really like about this paper collection, black cardstock works well for layering. You don't have to look for a bunch of different blues, yellows, greens, since sometimes it's really hard to find those perfect cardstock colors. For my cardstock layers, I generally add an additional 1/8 of an inch. If you prefer a wider border, I would recommend adding 1/4 of an inch. For a sentiment, I'm using another cut apart. This is Happy Birthday, and I'll adhere it in place using some liquid adhesive. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this design. I decided not to add any embellishments. Sometimes it's nice to have a few flat cards, so I don't have to worry about paying additional postage to mail it. For card design number 4, the card sketch is from MFT. This is number 180. I selected 3 different pattern papers. I have a yellow distress paper for the background, a black honeycomb for that banner on the left side, and the final design has lots of bee and honey images on it. I'll cut a fishtail at the bottom of the black honeycomb paper, then add that banner on the left side of the card. I'll layer the background piece on some black cardstock, put ATG tape on the back, and add my card front onto a card base, leaving 1/8 of an inch of the white card base showing. Next, I'll layer the final pattern paper piece on some black cardstock and adhere it on the right side of the card. For a sentiment, I'm using another cut apart. This is It's Your Birthday. I'll cut a fishtail on the left side. Before adhering it to the card, I will put some scrap cardstock pieces on the very left side where it goes off of the bee and honey pattern paper. Then I'll adhere it in place using some liquid adhesive. I'll bring in several of the die cut images. I have 3 bees and also the pot of honey. I have foam dimension on the back of the honey and the 2 small bees. I'll add the pot of honey right above the sentiment on the right side, and the 2 small bees will go in the upper left-hand corner. The final bee I'll glue directly onto the pot of honey. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this design. For card design number 5, this is a very simple card design. One of my favorite pattern papers in the whole pack is this beautiful sunflower scene. I cut it down to an A2 size, and I'll be adding one of the gnome images. I put foam dimension on the back of the gnome, and I adhered it in place so the very bottom of the gnome does hang off the bottom of the card. I'll simply flip over my card, use my scissors to trim that edge off. I'll add the sentiment, "You mean the world to me." I did cut the right side at an angle, and I have some double-sided adhesive tape on the back side to adhere it in place. I have one more die cut image, a small bee, and I did pop it up with some foam dimension. Then for a final finishing touch, instead of adding the crystals, I decided to use some Nuvo crystal drops. This is the Morning Dew color, so it's all clear. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this design. Super simple, but I love how it turned out. Card design number 6 is another favorite of mine. I have the black honeycomb paper for the background. I'm adding a narrow strip of green cardstock. I'll layer the background piece on some black cardstock, put some ATG tape on the back, and add my card front onto a card base, leaving 1/8 of an inch of the white card base showing. Next, I'll adhere a large stitched oval die cut, and I cut this out of black cardstock. I'll adhere it in place using some liquid adhesive. Now I'll bring in several of the die cut pieces. I have this large floral arrangement with sunflowers and 3 of the gnomes. I did put foam dimension on the back of the sunflower piece, but for all of the gnomes, I'll be gluing them down directly using liquid adhesive. Before removing the release paper, I'll lay that sunflower piece down, and I'll be tucking all 3 of the gnomes behind the floral arrangement. Once the gnomes are in place, I'll remove the release paper and adhere my flowers down. I love how those gnomes are all peeking around the flowers. For a sentiment, I'm using another cut apart. This is a little something to make you smile. I put some double-sided adhesive tape on the back side. I'll remove the release paper and adhere it to the bottom of the card. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this design. For the second card, I did use a different sentiment. Your smile brightens up my day. For card design number 7, switching back to those muted colors, I have some of the daisy paper for the background, adding a strip of blue pattern paper, and this is the leftover piece from the top of the sunflower paper. I'll layer the daisy paper on some blue cardstock, add my card front onto a card base, leaving 1/8 of an inch of the white card base showing. Next, I'll add a large stitched oval die cut, and I did cut this out from some white shimmer cardstock. I'll adhere that in place using liquid adhesive, and it'll be more on the right side of the card. Next, I'll add one of the larger die cut images. It has some honey, a couple of signs, daisies, and a little birdhouse. I'll adhere that in place using liquid adhesive. For a sentiment, I'm using another cut apart. This is Just Because. I'll cut the right side at an angle, and before adhering it to the card, I will put that scrap cardstock piece on the very right side. Then I'll adhere it in place using liquid adhesive. To finish off the card, I'll add some more of Nuvo's Crystal Drops in the Morning Dew color. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this design. Now moving on to card design number 7. The card sketch is from MFT. This is number 615. I have one final sheet of the pretty daisy paper. I'll use that for the background. Adding a small piece of the yellow honeycomb paper. I'll layer the background on some blue cardstock. It's more of a grayish blue. And I'll layer the honeycomb paper on some of the white shimmer cardstock. Put my card front onto a card base, leaving 1/8 of an inch of the white card base showing. Now I'll bring in several of the die cut images. I have another little gnome, and I love how he's holding a bouquet of daisies. I also have 3 of the small daisy images and a small bee. The gnome I did pop up with some foam dimension. All the other die cut images I'll adhere down using liquid adhesive. That larger daisy, part of it does hang off the honeycomb paper, so I am adding some scrap cardstock just on the right side. Then I'll adhere it in place using liquid adhesive. I'll remove the release paper on the gnome and adhere him to my card. That final little bee I'll attach to the larger daisy. For a final finishing touch, I'll add some silver sequins. I'll put 2 in the upper right hand corner and 3 in the lower left hand corner. I really like these sequins. They're nice and flat, and there isn't a hole in the center. I'm using my embellishment wand to pick those up, adding just a small drop of liquid adhesive and pressing them in place. And I thought the silver color worked nicely with the blues on this card. So there is my finished card, and this time I made a total of 3, although all of the cards are different. Since at this point in the video, I'm running out of full sheets of pattern paper. I also used different die cut images for each of the cards. And instead of silver sequins, I used some black sequins on the other 2 cards. For my final card design, this is card design number 9. The card sketch is from MFT. This is number 624. I have some craft cardstock for the background, and this time I used the hand stitching cover plate die and actually cut it out, so I have all those teeny tiny little holes. On the back of that craft piece, I put some white shimmer cardstock, so now through all of those holes there's that little touch of shimmer. I'll put some adhesive on the back and adhere this panel on some green cardstock, and I decided to have a little wider border on the top and bottom. Put some ATG tape on the back, add my card front onto a card base, leaving 1/8 of an inch of the white card base showing. For the 3 circles on the sketch, I'm using 3 different sunflower die cut pieces. And for the bottom sunflower, I did have the bottom hanging off the edge, flipped over that panel, used my scissors so it's nice and flush to the bottom. For the sunflower with the sentiment, "You are my sunshine," I did put foam dimension on the back. The other 2 sunflowers I adhered down using liquid adhesive. For a final finishing touch, I'm adding a couple banners in the upper left-hand corner. For the larger banner, I cut it out of the same green cardstock. For the smaller banner, I used some white shimmer cardstock. Before adhering the white banner down, I will add that scrap cardstock piece. Then I'll adhere both of those in place using liquid adhesive. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this design. This is another favorite of mine, but I'm also a big fan of sunflowers. Now here's another look at the 19 cards I made using Paper Rose Studios' Be Happy collection. I used the 6x6 size, but it's also available in the 12x12. Along with the paper pad, I also used the coordinating die cut pack for all of the fun images. If you are interested in any of the products I used in this video, I do have links provided in the description box below. Paper Rose is located in Australia, and they do ship internationally, but you can also purchase their products here in the US, and I do have links for both in the description box below. This is such a fun collection. I love the bright colors and cheerful images, perfect for brightening up someone's day. Thank you so much for watching. and I hope you have a wonderful day.